Built by horse players for horse players, AmWager is designed for speed, power, and ease of use. AmWager brings CAW-style tools to everyday horse players, including Dutching, ABC Ticket Maker, and Pro Percent, an advanced betting tool that lets you assign weighted percentages and build multiple structured wagers with a single click. Every month, AmWager turns the odds in your favor with 0% takeout on select tracks. These promos offer you up to $100 more for your winning bets and giving you value for your wagers not offered anywhere else. Rated 4.7 stars on Google with over 200 reviews, AmWager is trusted by horse players who expect more from their wagering platform. If you're looking for better tools and better value, you need AmWager. Void where prohibited. For terms and conditions, visit amwager.com. Must be 18 or older, 21 or older where applicable. Gambling problem? Please call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY. Text HOPE.
Welcome to the Sport of Kings podcast, episode 364, sponsored by AmWager. Go to amwager.com to see all their promotions, including the upcoming 0% takeout on all win bets at Saratoga on Saturday, Belmont Stakes Day. That's right. The big day at Saratoga got even better. With an AmWager account, you can get 0 takeout on win bets. So take advantage of that, and if you don't have an AmWager account, it might be a good time to get one. As always, I welcome your feedback on Twitter/X. My handle is @Derby1592. And this week, I'm joined by special guest Craig Milkowski, developer of the speed and pace figures used in Timeform US past performances. We're going to have a detailed discussion about races 9 through 13, including the Belmont Stakes from Saratoga Racecourse on Saturday. The show will focus on finding and exploiting value. We'll talk about our strongest handicapping opinions and also how we might leverage those opinions using optimal betting strategies. Hi, Craig. How's it going?
Going well, Chris. Looking forward to doing this with you, completing the Triple Crown, which no horses actually seem to want to do anymore. We can't even get them to we barely get them to do 2 legs, so 3's pretty good for us.
Yeah, but you're doing a Triple Crown on the Sport of Kings podcast. You've been with me for the Belmont and Preakness. I had to ask you back after you nailed the Preakness for the Belmont here. So we'll have our own little Triple Crown. We made it to all 3. You stuck it out. You dug deep, and you're here for the 3rd leg. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I didn't bounce after that 2-week layoff for the Derby. We'll see if it has any lingering effects here for the Belmont.
Yeah, hopefully you've recovered from your beloved Thunder falling to San Antonio. They weren't able to repeat, but I'm sure they'll be back again next year.
Yeah, they're a good team. I mean, I was over that by the time I got home that night. I love the Thunder, but it's not one of those things that is going to change how my day goes.
Oh, that's good to hear. I'm not going to ask you about your methodology because we've talked about that recently, but you have finished my book, and is there anything, as we go into this sequence on a big day, a bunch of grade 1 races, anything in the book that might be worth mentioning or talking about before we get started on the races that kind of resonated with you that might come into play as we talk about these races?
I mean, the biggest thing on a day like this is just looking for value. We're going to be dealing with a whole bunch of name horses. You're going to have a lot of casual money in the pools, and it's one of the very few days like this where you can really take advantage and get some overlays that you would never see on a Wednesday or Thursday or, even a Saturday that's not a big stakes day, maybe a card at NYRA or Churchill that just has one listed stake or something like that. It's not going to draw the outside money, but it's a day you don't have to pay attention to the CAW too much, and particularly being an NYRA track, the one track that's really going above and beyond, at least compared to others. I'm not going to say they're doing everything they possibly could, but they're doing some really nice things for horse players as far as restricting the play of the CAWs, and I think that really helps.
Yeah, I totally agree that I spend a lot of time in the book talking about how the the CAW team and what their models are like and how they operate, and ways that you can improve your results in the age of the CAWs. And one kind of obvious one, but it doesn't seem so obvious because it seems like most players aren't doing it, is you should bet into the pools where they're being throttled or managed. And that means playing NYRA. Now, there's a few exceptions in other tracks, certain pools like the Wind Pool at Sandy and Del Mar, but pretty much every other track, the CAWs run wild in every pool, and that just makes it so much harder to win. So, if you want to improve your results and do better, then move your handle to the pools where you have a better chance. You have a more level playing field. And that is right now is NYRA. And I think we talked a little bit offline, the winter racing at NYRA has been pretty bad. That's, it always is. And I think maybe the Tapeta track might help that a little. We'll find out. But, the summer racing at Saratoga is the best in the country. And now you're going to have the most player-friendly pools with the best racing. And if you're a horse player and you're not shifting your handle to Saratoga this summer, I don't understand why you're in the game. I mean, do you like to lose money? Do you like to beat your head against the wall and get crushed and T.O. Elvis by CAW teams on a regular basis? Are you just a masochist, or are you rational? And do you want to try to win and improve your results? If so, you got to be shifting your handle to Saratoga. And I don't get a nickel from NYRA for anything. This is just I'm pleading with horse players to do what's best for them. And if we collectively do what's best for ourselves, we'll collectively improve the game, because tracks will have to take notice if we're all shifting our handle towards the one track that's trying to manage the teams. If we don't, the exact opposite is going to happen. They're just going to reinforce their thinking that it doesn't really matter, that we're stubborn and foolish, or foolish, and just aren't willing to change. And, it's just going to continue to get worse and worse like it has. So,
and these benefits will go away at tracks if it doesn't. I mean, if Saratoga, they're not getting some kind of uptick in the wagering from the regular everyday player, then they're going to say, why are we doing this? Why are we costing ourselves money? So,
right. And none of the other tracks will follow suit. But if their handle's down and NYRA's way up, they're going to take notice. That's a big if, right? Because players have to change. And so far, it doesn't seem like they're capable of it. But I can tell you now, my handle is going to be mostly at NYRA, at Saratoga. And I'm sure I'll have better results than if I were playing other tracks. Now, I'll still play some other tracks on their big days and try to play the pools where you have a little better chance. And I talk about that in the book. How you can kind of pick your spots and maybe improve your results versus the teams. But, the obvious one and the one that everyone should be doing is shifting their handle to the track that's trying to manage the teams. And I really think if we miss this window of opportunity, the ship has sailed. And I'm really, for the gambling game of racing, I don't know how many more years we have of where it's at all playable. So it's kind of up to players to step up. So I'm hoping they do. Past performances don't encourage me, but I'm thinking maybe this time will be different. This time they're going to, they're going to put the blinkers on or take the blinkers off or whatever, and have an improved performance collectively as horse players. Because, racetrack management's been bad, but players haven't made things any better themselves. So they make it kind of easy for the tracks to abuse us because we continue to come back for more on a regular basis. All right, I'll stop with the rant. I do want to mention one thing on the betting menu at Saratoga. They have some special bets. One I like is a $5 minimum double that they have a Woody Stevens and Met Mile into the Belmont. That that minimum usually higher minimum usually means better payouts if you get a value horse in there. And they do have a 2-day 15% pick 5 and pick 6 that if you like the 2-day, the horizontals, I don't recommend that for people. It's tough to hit. Over 2 days kind of makes it even harder. But the teams are out of those pools, supposedly, at least in their normal wagering methods. So, the chance of getting a good payout is much better than it would be at tracks where they allow them to run wild. So there are some special bets you can look at. I always like those high minimum bets, so that's one way to look.
Right? That's to be
sorry.
clear, that's not a double on the Woody Stevens and Met Mile. It's each of those and the Belmont, right?
Right. It's the Woody Stevens into the Belmont and the Met Mile into the Belmont. Thanks for clarifying that. Both of them are ending in the Belmont, but they're both $5 doubles. And there are some 2-day doubles too. I think like the Acorn into the Belmont as well, and some other bet. But I like those high minimums. They're usually you get rewarded for a good opinion more so than you would at the low minimums. And I think for players, it forces you to be tighter. And a lot of players complain about it, especially like in a pick 3 or a try or super, but really it's going to improve their long-term results even if they don't realize it. So I kind of use the analogy, it's like eating your vegetables. You may not like it, but it's good for you. So those high minimums are the way to go. I wish tracks would experiment more with more of those. But let's get started. All 5 of these races are grade 1s. Not too often you get a 5-race sequence, all grade 1 races. And we kick it off in the 9th race with the Jaipur, 5.5 furlongs on the turf for older horses. I love these turf sprints. People listen to the podcast know that. In this one, we've got a solid favorite, AG Bullet, or as I say, Silver Bullet is the way you should pronounce it, I think, is the favorite. She's a filly against the boys. She's beat the boys before, including, I think, in this race last year. There's a couple other horses, Reef Runner and Litigation, that are going to might vie for favoritism. What are you thinking of the favorites? You like one of those? You like somebody else? So where are you headed in this race?
I mean, I think this race is pretty open. So it's a race where playing vertically or just win bets, I'm going to avoid the favorites. AG Bullet, I wonder a little bit. Coming off a layoff, she's a 6-year-old now. She's only had really one long layoff in her career, and she was able to win that pretty easily, but it wasn't in this kind of race. So, I mean, I think there are some real questions with her. She's beaten boys in this race last year, obviously, with a nice figure. She beat My Boy Prince, who's also in this race, but she was coming in that one with a little more seasoning. So she can win, but she's going to be the favorite, and I'm not interested in her. Similar story with Litigation. He's a good horse, obviously. He's pretty consistent. He wins at times, but he's just always overbet, in my opinion. He always takes a lot of money. I'm always leery of horses that lose at short prices fairly regularly. Now, he's won 6 out of 12 career starts, but he's always way down there since especially since he switched to turf. So I'm sure he's going to run fine, but maybe if I was playing horizontals, I'd have to throw him in there. But I don't like him. And even the third choice on the morning line, Reef Runner, he's the one of all the favorites. I wouldn't use him at all. He's coming back from overseas. He ran in 2 races over there, the Saudi race and the UAE race. And he ran well, obviously. Won a $2 million race in Saudi, only beaten a length and a half at Meydan. But I just don't think he's that good. I think he's probably in over his head. I think those fields were pretty weak over there. The time form ratings back that up. His figures before going over there weren't all that great. So of the 3, he's one I wouldn't be using at all of the favorites.
All right. So you're maybe willing to take a shot against those favorites. Who are you thinking about playing, if anybody?
There's a couple horses that I'm considering playing in here. One I will definitely use is John the Beer Man, the 8 horse. He was a horse who was off about 2 years after breaking his maiden, came back in a new barn as a first-time gelding, and he's done absolutely nothing wrong. He's wire to wire. He's won both of those sprints easily. His figure regressed a little last time on Timeform US, but that was over yielding turf, going 6 furlongs, a little bit longer than he's going to go here. And I just think he's going to get a great trip. The Timeform US pace projector has this race as not having a ton of speed, and he should be sitting right there with AG Bullet to the outside. Whenever I get a 2 horse speed situation, I will almost always prefer the one on the outside in a 1 turn race like this. So at 10 to 1 on the morning line, I think he's going to offer some real value. And the other horse is the 10 horse, my boy Prince, who is just a fabulous sprinter. He's a really good horse overall. This is a horse that ran second in the King's Plate, going 1.25 miles on synthetic. He ran third in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf as a 2-year-old, but his niche has really been sprinting. Every time this horse sprints, he just shows up and runs a really good race, other than one time at Keeneland when he was coming off a layoff. But I think he's probably the best horse in the field. I just worry a little bit about the outside post, though. The lack of speed in here should allay those fears a little bit. So for me, 8 and 10 are the two I'm really interested in betting. John the Beer Man and my boy Prince.
Yeah, I can see that. So a couple of things that I'll offer. First of all, with the favorite AG Bullet, the one thing that's worth noting, I think, with her is last year, her one bad race was off the layoff in May, right? So, and this is coming off a layoff. This is even a longer layoff, probably. The other thing is she's a 6-year-old mare, and I just have seen mares, even the good ones, they can go sour. Unlike a gelding, the mares sometimes they just decide they're not going to, they don't feel like running anymore. And I'm not saying that will happen with her, but I'm always wondering off a long layoff, a 6-year-old mare probably going shorter than her best distance. I mean, she has won at this distance, but she's won at longer distances, probably somewhere, 6.5 probably is her best distance. I think there are some chinks in that armor. And also, I watched a recent workout. She got outworked by a turf router in the barn. So that wasn't really a good thing either, I didn't think. And you did mention the slow pace. I think that helps her. There really isn't speed in here. But if you notice, she's on the lead when they're going longer, but typically at these shorter distances, she likes to sit off, right? She's not up on the lead when they're going 5 or 5.5. So I think that she will be happy. They'll be happy to cede the lead to John the Beerman. And I really agree with you. He is a horse I like a lot in here because I think he'll be pressing a soft pace, but I think they'll just go with him. Kendrick's very aggressive. And I think the AG Bull will be happy to let him go. And I think he'll clear and he could wire the field at a big price. He's really an interesting horse because I had a whole paragraph of trip notes in all of his races when he was under Chad Brown. He had eventful trips in all those races. They were trying to, Chad was trying to make him a router and he's trying to get him to rate and he just didn't like it. And then something obviously went really seriously wrong. But back in the Atras barn, they were happy to let him, run early and sprint. They're not dead set on making him a turf router, and he's really responded, I think. And he was gelded too, probably didn't hurt. So I like him a lot. I really do. I think he's the play. The other thing I would add, and I've always liked my boy Prince. People listen to the podcast know that I always said, if this horse cuts back, I want him. I want him as a sprinter. I don't want him going long. So I've always liked him as a sprinter. but the one other horse you didn't mention that I like is the horse between John the Beerman and My Boy Prince, the 9-horse 26 Black. This horse is just really good at Saratoga. Really, he maybe isn't quite been running against this level of competition typically, but they have run this horse in a grade 2 and it ran second, and they're, it's hardly any grade 1 turf sprint. So grade 2's pretty high level turf sprint. And that was at Saratoga. The horse always runs its race. I don't think the slow pace will help it much, but I mean, this horse, I think it fits really nicely and could get into the number at a price. So for me, I kind of see it the same way you do. I think maybe even like John the Beerman a little more than you do. He's definitely the key to this race for me. But I can see, My Boy Prince and 26 Black also getting in there. But for me, John the Beerman's really good value. I hope can get 10-1, and I think in this field you might just get it. We'll see. And also Rob Atras has been pretty hot lately, so that doesn't hurt either.
Yeah, for sure he has. My only knock on the 9 is I haven't checked the buyer figures, but on Timeform US, he just is not fast enough to beat horses like this. And he's shown at the back of the pace projector, which is kind of a negative for me, but he's certainly consistent. I mean, the horse has never run what I would say was just a bad race. He always shows up with his best number.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. He has a couple 100 buyers. He looks pretty good on buyer from a speed figure. So you guys saw a couple of those races differently. Let's see. The August 31st and August 3rd races last year, they have those as pretty fast. The Bring Home the Band race, and then the one when he beat Bolt.
I mean, listen, turf sprints are tough. There's usually only one, maybe two, if we're lucky. That August 31st race, I know, was a slow pace race, so it's possible buyer kind of gave that one just a little bit of an upgrade. Yeah. We don't do that for sprints. You don't get any bonus points or anything for turf sprints. You're supposed to run faster, but it closed into the slow pace. So, I mean, he ran well and was able to win that race really easily.
Yeah. So anyway, I agree. The race doesn't seem to set up for him. I don't mind so much him being on the outside because I have a feeling he'll just drop back, but I don't know if it's going to set up for him. But he's always finishing, and if he gets a trip, and his trainer's kind of hot right now too, then he always runs his race. I don't know if it's going to be good enough, but he never runs a bad race. He's always finishing. But I really like John the Beerman. He's the play, I think, in here. And the only thing I'm a little bit nervous about is the 1 horse. Makes me a little nervous because it's down on the rail. It's got Paco. This is another horse they were like constantly trying to get him to rate last year. They've gelded him. He used to be like want to go to the front all the time horse. So they could send. If they send with him, that will screw up. It'll screw up my whole race scenario with John the Beerman. If he gets in a speed duel with the 1, then that's not gonna do him any favors. But I was
a little leery of him. His race coming back from the layoff was pretty poor. Didn't show any speed, but he is just a 4-year-old making a second start off of over 6-month layoff. So he's certainly a little bit of a wild card in here.
Yeah, and that was on the synth too.
Yes.
So he might not have, liked it. Maybe didn't handle it. Anyway, that I'm not picking him though. I'm not saying one. I wouldn't be shocked if he does go forward, even if he doesn't get the lead. If he goes forward and sits in the pocket or something, he has a shot. He could improve. I'm just more worried about him, on a dead send hooking up with John the Beerman, because then all of a sudden that favors the favors front runners might change. If those two get hooked up in they both want the lead. Kendrick wants the lead and Paco wants the lead. That might change things completely. So that's the only reason I throw that out. Anything else on this race then? So
that's it for me.
So was this a possible win bet for you on John the Beerman?
Yeah, I'm interested in John the Beerman to win, and definitely some exactas with the 10 horse, my boy Prince, and also I'd probably throw Litigation in my exactas as well to be second, not to win. Maybe a small 3. It just depends. 3-8 just depends on the odds.
Yeah, and I don't expect this 8 to get bet down much below that morning line. I think this horse, I'm not worried about this one. I'm pretty confident we'll be able to bet to win. I'm not like, oh, I'm not sure what kind of price we're going to get. There's enough other quality horses in here. Like we haven't even mentioned Works for Me. He's coming off some good races. He's a good horse. You know, AG Bullet, Litigation, you know, Reef Runner, they're all going to be shorter than John the Beer Man. So, and it's a 10 horse field. So I think, you know, 8 to 10 to 1, pretty safe that you're going to get that price. So for me, it's definitely going to be a horse I'll be bidding. All right, let's move to the next race. It's one of my favorite races every year. The Woody Stevens, a grade 1 going 7 furlongs. This is where all the horses all through the Triple Crown, you're saying, well, this horse, I don't think he can get the distance, but boy, when they cut him back in the Woody Stevens, he'll be tough. And we got like 3 or 4 of those horses in here. Plus you get some of those horses that are just showed, you know, brilliant sprinter speed. You know, that they didn't get suckered into the Triple Crown Trail, or they developed a little too late to get onto it. So you get them all. And to me, you got a really good mix of that kind of race in here. And you've got one horse that could be, you know, you could argue might have shown the most talent of any of the 3-year-olds in training right now, and that's a 6-horse Crude Velocity. And he's really done nothing wrong to this point. He's probably going to get bet down below that 9 to 5 morning line, I'm going to guess. He might be the free square people are looking for. What do you think? Are you going to try to beat Crude Velocity, or are you going to lean into him?
You know, this is a race that would largely depend on the board. My gut feeling is it's a race I'll probably just watch as a fan because I'm not sure there's going to be any value. I think it starts with Crude Velocity. He's run the best time form US speed figure of any 3-year-old. Did that in the Pat Day Mile. I do have small concerns. I'm not a big bounce guy, but that was a really taxing race. And him and Englishman, who I'll talk about in a second, were both all out for a long, long way in that race. They're coming back in, you know, just, I guess it's 6 weeks now, but nowadays that's a pretty quick return. So I think there's a little concern there. I wouldn't want to take a short price on either of them. Englishman is really fast. So I think you can just pencil in ink in that the pace is going to be fast. Even if he's not challenged, he's going to set some real fractions out there and play catch me if you can. And one thing I noted is they were both all out for a long time. It's not like Crude Velocity was raiding in behind him, and he couldn't catch him till after they passed the 7 furlong mark in that Pat Day Mile. So you wonder if the shorter distance would help him a little bit. But Englishman, he's going to be the second choice in here. The other thing you might want to look at is maybe there's going to be a meltdown. And so to be clear, I wouldn't bet either one of these horses if I'm just betting this race alone, which is why I'd probably pass, because I think between the two of them, they hold the vast majority of likely to win. But there are a couple horses I would consider if they start to drift up, seeing that I think those two might hook up. I think Crude Velocity would probably have to go after Englishman a little bit sooner. And they're the two inside horses, Gilded Bandit and Obliteration. If either one of them drifts up from the 8 to 1 morning line, which could very well happen if the other two get bet, I could see them closing into this race. And Obliteration's more of a tracker. He doesn't drop way back in his races, in his dirt races. He's even shown a decent amount of speed, but he's rateable for sure. His speed figures are getting better. He ran 117 last time on Preakness Day in the Chick Lang Stakes. And it was a pretty slow pace. Now, part of why it was slow in Time Form US is because of how fast he finished it off. And but he ran a nice speed figure that day. His final time figure was 121. So if the two in front of him go crazy, I could easily see him winning it. And then if we had a meltdown, Gilded Bandit's what I would say is a true closer. I expect him to just drop out of it and be at the back of the field. If this was a 6 furlong race, he wouldn't interest me at all, but it's not. It's 7, which is kind of perfect for a deep closer in a race like this if you expect a hot pace. So it's a race where I'll be watching the board and just seeing if either of those two drift up. I don't think we'll get any value on Crude Velocity or Englishman. A couple horses I don't like, and they probably won't take money, but just name horses are 6 Speed, who set the pace in the Kentucky Derby. Obviously, a very fast pace for a 1.25 miles, but I don't think he's of this quality. Even his races in Maidan, I didn't think were all that great. He was a horse I instantly tossed in the Derby, but he might take some money just from that running line. And Taj Mahal, who actually was the favorite in the Preakness, has showed some pretty high speed his last 2 races out, but I didn't like him at all in the Preakness, and I don't like him at all in this race either.
Yeah, those two are like classic cutback horses. What do you think? Do you think either one of them are quick enough to go with Englishman?
I don't. On the pace projector, Englishman shown with whatever the maximum lead that we give a horse is. I don't remember what it is, 2 or 3 lengths, I think, but number wise, he's probably even more than that. The difference is Englishman's speed came at sprints. And at least 6 furlongs and a 1-turn mile, whereas Taj Mahal, he's only run a sprint once and he didn't go particularly fast that day. His others have been a 1-turn mile and then 2-turn races all at Laurel, and 6 Speed largely. He did show some speed, but when you read the running lines, he tracked the pace or pressed the leader. It's not like he's a horse who just has crazy speed. Now, it looks like that when he goes 1.25 miles because he's just not really a rateable horse, but I don't think he's all that fast.
So the other kind of cut back, although it's the second time cutting back, but he was sort of the classic. You knew he was a sprinter all along. They had to try him on the Triple Crown Trail. They tried one race and they went back to sprinting. That's Solitude Dude. He's pretty quick, but do you think, again, he probably will be happy to stock Englishman? But you didn't mention him at all. What do you think about Solitude Dude?
Yeah, I think he's going to be chasing, and that's a position I usually hate. It worked out for Crude Velocity in the Pat Day Mile, but it's one that when you're chasing a faster horse, it very rarely does it work out. And Solitude Dude, he's a good horse, obviously. He's won 4 out of 5. The one time he lost was going 2 turns to Commandment, who we're going to talk about later for sure. And not only that, he's won all his races easily, but speed figure wise, he's just a notch below some of these in here. And I don't love the position he's going to be in.
Yeah, it seems like there's a bunch of chasers. And are they going to be a better chaser than Crude Velocity? Probably not, right? Solitude Dude, 6 Speed, and Taj Mahal, they're all going to be chasing.
Civil Liberty is kind of that same kind of horse.
Yeah, they're going to all be chasing Englishmen along with Crude Velocity. Are they going to be able to outrun Crude Velocity in that chase spot? Probably not. So I really see this race really similar. One thing I will note, this race does melt down fairly often, which is why I like it so much, because I've had some really good scores on this race in the past. I don't see necessarily a meltdown, but, we talked about all these chasers chasing a speed horse. It does seem like it's going to set up for everybody. The other two that you just mentioned, Gilded Bandit, I think, is more of a clunk up. He's the kind that, wins a pace meltdown kind of race. He's probably not as good as some of these, but he's looked pretty good in his races. But the horse I love in here, I really, really like the 2-horse Obliteration. His form is muddied up, but if you just look at his turf sprints, he's just been brilliant. He's a brilliant, he started his career like a monster. And this is Steve Asmussen, who knows how to, handle a good turf sprinter. But then they did something weird, and I think it might have been they were chasing a grade 1 as a 2-year-old, and there just wasn't any sprinter races, so they decided they were going to try to win the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf Sprint with him. He didn't run bad on the turf, but, He just wasn't a turf horse. But they tried him 3 straight races on the turf. So that kind of muddies up his form. But then once they put him right back on the turf, he galloped again, just crushed the field. And then they said, well, he's not a turf horse. He's not a Triple Crown horse, but maybe we can win this big purse in Saudi going 1 turn mile. And they ran him there in the Saudi, whatever they call it, whatever that 3-year-old race is. And he ran huge in that race. That was about as contested a pace you'll ever see. There was 5 or 6 horses right on the lead across the track right from the get-go on that race. And he was down on the rail feeling all that pressure all the way around. And then he got a little tired in mid-stretch and he fell back into second. But then he actually dug back in and got past the horse who had passed him. And then, of course, came over the top at the end to beat him. But he showed me a lot of grit. And clearly he's a sprinter. And then they brought him back and a perfect prep. It was an easy win. And you don't see this very often at 6 furlong stakes races where, he's finishing faster than he started, almost, not maybe in real time, but on his time form US figures. I mean, he powered home in that race. And that was only a few weeks ago, but it was clearly just a prep for this. Their target is this grade 1 sprint. So, I'm not convinced that Crude Velocity is any better than Obliteration at 7 furlongs. And I think Obliteration is going to, he's not going to be in chase mode. He's going to be in stock mode. That's right where he wants to be, I think. Just sitting off of those horses, let them do the dirty work, and he's going to power home. And I think, both Englishman and Crude Velocity are going to have a hard time holding him off. So I like him a lot in here. And he may get completely overlooked just because his form's been muddied up by some turf races and that trip to Saudi. But, man, he is just a brilliant turf sprinter. If there's a trainer who knows how to, get these horses to run, to peak in the big races, these turf sprinters, it's Steve Asmussen, so I like that horse a lot.
Yeah, I can see that. And I think it's pretty simple with him. They were chasing the big purses because there aren't the grade 1s, like you said. So they ran for $1 million at Kentucky Downs. He didn't run bad that day, so they kept him on turf, hoping for the juvenile turf sprint. And then, $1.5 million in Saudi, they gave it a shot, and he ran second. So that's why this horse has made almost $1 million already without being, I don't think he's a graded stakes winner yet. Oh, yeah, he won the Saratoga special. Oh, no, he was second. Sanford. He won the grade 3 Sanford. So, he hasn't had the big highlights, but I think he's better than what his resume would tell you.
Yeah, I think he's really, really good. I think, he's very good. I wouldn't be shocked to see him win a lot more races if they keep him sprinting on the dirt. So anyway, and you'll get value in here because, Crude Velocity is going to take a huge amount of money. Englishman's going to take his share just because, like you said, 7 furlongs, maybe he's just too fast for these, right? He can run them off their feet and he can hang on even against Crude Velocity at 7. He'll take money. Some of these other Triple Crown horses will take money. And then I agree with you, Gilded Bandit. He's definitely, I'll be playing him. Maybe Crude Velocity is just too good, so I'll probably have something with him on top of Obliteration as sort of a backup. But I don't think anybody else, and maybe Englishman can wire this field. I don't know, especially if it's a speed favoring track. We'll have to keep an eye on that. But to me, Obliteration is just he's perfect kind of turf sprinter. He's got, the ability to lay close, but he can power home. And that just, to me, is the ideal turf sprinter. And he's run some big numbers, at 2-year-old race. He ran his second start at Saratoga, 108 on time form US in July as a 2-year-old. That's pretty fast. He won by 10 lengths at Saratoga in a stakes race.
Yeah. One of the things I do is I add points for maturity, in my head when I'm making lines. And I think the old adage is a point to a point and a half a month, and this horse has been away all, 11 months. So you could add anywhere from 11 to 17 or 18 points to that figure to give a good gauge of what his true ability is. Because as you said, it is a little bit muddied up, and he's really good. You look at his Oaklawn race where he just absolutely romped. He only ran a 113 that day, but if you go back and watch the replay, he had a bad break. He was wide
Right.
all the way
Yeah.
around the
He
track.
was
That it
parked
easily
wide,
could have been a
really wide on
120s
that one.
figure.
Yeah.
Yeah, easily could have been in the 120s. So
And his last race, that slow pace, he just powered home. Like you kind of knocked him down a little bit because he finished so fast. I'm not going to hold that against him. It was 121, which kind of lines up with the numbers you were talking about. If you don't do the pace adjustment, he was running the 120 right there.
yeah.
So anyway, and I think that was a prep. They were, and if you listen to Asmussen, that was one interview where they interviewed him about his. I think he must have had a horse in the had Chip Honcho, but they talked about obliteration, and you could tell, he knew obliteration was going to obliterate that field. You could just tell that he just this was just it was going to be a jog in the park, and they were thinking ahead on this horse, and he was right. And I think this is the payoff. Hopefully, we'll see.
Chip Poncho didn't run too bad either.
No, he didn't. He probably ran as well as he possibly can at that distance, right?
Yep.
So there's nothing wrong. Asmussen's really good with 3-year-olds. His horses just typically don't run bad races as 3-year-olds. They just continue to steadily improve, and this horse showed his brilliance right from the start, So I think he could be a special horse, and he's not been talked about that way. Maybe he will be after this race. We'll see. Or maybe, Englishmen and Crude Velocity are too good. We'll see. But I'll be on Obliteration, and hopefully I'll be sitting on a big double from John the Beer Man into Obliteration going into this race. Okay. Anything else before we go to the next one?
Now we got to go to my favorite race ever, every year.
I love
this race.
Yeah, I love one-turn miles, graded stakes one-turn miles, or any one-turn mile, but because it brings together everybody. You can get middle distance horses cutting back, and you can get, brilliant sprinters trying to go a little bit farther, and they're all meeting in the middle. And I think you're gonna see some of that in this race. You've got Nysos, who's the favorite, and then we're talking about the Met Mile. This is a mile on the dirt. This is Saratoga 11th. Nysos is the favorite. He wins a lot of races. He doesn't wow you with his speed figures or his margins of victory typically, but he's consistent. I always bet against him, and I lose most of the time. Journalism has been, a hyped horse for a long time. He never runs a bad race. His losses are all to good horses, but he's kind of the classic cutting back in distance for this. Those two will vie for favoritism. What do you think of those two? Or do you like anybody else in here? What are you thinking on this race?
I think Nysos will wind up the favorite. I'm going to agree with David Aragona on this one. I think he probably has this one pegged about right. Personally, I think Journalism's the better horse. I don't love that Nysos hasn't really improved much at all, speed figure wise from, his debut. Even February of his 3-year-old season, he was running a 122, and he's still kind of running. He's maxed out at 125. All his other numbers are between 120 and 125. So for me, that's a little bit concerning. He draws the rail, which it can be a good thing when coming out of the chute. That's the one thing about this being at Saratoga. It's a kind of 1.5 turn mile or something to that effect. It's got that weird angled chute, which sometimes can cause problems for the horses outside, but this isn't a huge field, so hopefully it won't be too bad. And I just think Journalism's a better horse. He's run faster races as a 3-year-old. He came back and ran fine in the Oaklawn Handicap, ran a 125 speed figure that day, even though he was no match late for White Barrio and Sovereignty. And what I like really about him is the turn back, because the one question he's really always had in most of his races is he just doesn't finish them up. And I think the turn back is going to be perfect for him. I think he's a major player in here and the horse to beat.
Yeah, I'm totally with you and everything you said. Total agreement. Between those two, I much prefer journalism. Plus, you didn't mention he's got a lot of upside. He's off what I call the golden pattern, second off the layoff as a 4-year-old. You expect him to run a career best race in here, and a career best race is going to beat Nysos, I think. Nysos just has never really run fast races. The horses he beats just aren't that good. I mean, yeah, he's been dodging the best horses, right? Even Breeders' Cup, he went in the mile. He beat his stablemate, Citizen Bull, and he barely beat him, And so, who is he beaten? Who's he finished ahead that's really good?
Yep.
Name one horse that's a grade 1 horse, really good grade 1 horse that he's beaten. I don't think you can name one. Now, he ran pretty good against Forever Young. I'll give him that. I don't think that was an A performance by Forever Young, and he still couldn't win. But he's never really, he just isn't that. He's overrated. He's got a lot of wins and he's consistent, but he's not that fast, I don't think. And drawing that rail won't do him any favors. He's not going to be on the lead, and that means he's probably going to get shuffled back, right as they go into that turn. So I don't think I think the draw helps journalism. I'm not quite sure what trip he's going to get. I'm not sure what they're going to try to do with him. It does seem like he's going to have to drop back, but as long as he doesn't get hung wide, which in a small field doesn't seem likely because most of these horses want to go, he should get a decent trip, and I think he'll be finishing strong. But so anybody beyond those two though that you want to talk about?
I mean, Antiquarian is a little bit interesting to me just because he's a newly turned 5-year-old. Well, I guess not newly anymore, but newly in his career because it's only going to be a second start off the layoff. He came back with a big figure against a slow pace, but he's not the kind that's 6-1. I wouldn't be interested in betting him against journalism, even though they have the same speed figure. He has flopped a couple times that he's faced really tough competition. I mean, he won the Jockey Club Gold Cup. That was a weird race for me. He didn't run at all in the Classic. I have to assume something went wrong with that. But for the most part, he hasn't faced this kind of competition in his career. So I wouldn't be shocked if he won, but I don't think 6-1's enough value. The horse that's really interesting to me is Nightbridge. Not necessarily that I like him, because I still think he's going to get bet off that huge figure that he ran at Gulfstream Park that day. But I can tell you that was a really hard figure to make. It's still kind of cloudy if you look through the chart and see how the other horses have run back. You could argue maybe that 135 should have been a 128, which would still make him a contender in here. But as I go back, I have a really hard time making an excuse for his last race. He was getting a good trip and he just had nothing left. The pace was honest. I wouldn't say it was fast or slow. They were good figures, but he just really was never looked like he was going to win once they turned for home in that race, and he had nothing. So he's a horse that's going to take some money. Wouldn't shock me if he won, but I want no parts of him at the betting window.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I like Antiquarian more than you do. This horse I've always been a fan of, and I caught him at 17-1 in that funky race, or 13-1 in that funky Jockey Club Gold Cup. So that made me even more a fan. But he's a quirky horse. He's kind of a weird horse because he'll totally shut off, almost like he falls asleep, until the riders wake him up. And that's why I think he can run these longer races. They tried stretching him way out because he does just kind of shut off. So he's capable of going longer. But I really do think he's better sprinting and or going shorter at least. And you look at his 2 races where they bring him back off layoffs in shorter races. They've been really good. And what I really liked about his last one is he seemed more into the race, and he kind of just went to the lead on his own without having to get pedaled on or anything. I thought that was a really good sign. And his best efforts, his best race is better than Nisos, I think. And he's coming in. He had the perfect prep for this. So I like him quite a bit in here. And, he's got a stablemate in there with Vibe that will help ensure a decent early pace. Not that you necessarily need it, because I think there's plenty of speed in here. And, I think this horse can be sitting, hopefully save ground early and then ease out. And I think this horse has a big shot. I don't think he's as likely to win as Journalism, but I think he's more likely than anybody else. And at the price, I think he's the bet. So, I'll be playing Antiquarian and Journalism, Exacta for sure, but probably Antiquarian to win. I think he's going to run a big race in here. He did have that one, something went wrong. I don't know what happened in that last race of the year. But before that, he really had never run any bad races until he is on his 3-year-old year. He kind of didn't run so well on the Belmont, but something went wrong and he went on a layoff. And then he came back and he ran a bunch of good races, and something went wrong on a layoff. Now he came back and ran good, and his second races off a layoff have been good before. So I think he's going to run well. So he's the play for me. He in Journalism.
Yeah, to be clear, that's my play. I probably sounded a little more negative on him than I am. The bet I'm going to make for sure is Journalism and Antiquarian Exactas.
Yeah.
Because I have negatives on basically every other horse in the field. I either don't think they're good enough, or just in Knightsbridge case, I don't think he's in top form right now.
Yeah, I mean, Saudi Crown's a lot like Knightsbridge to me. He's run some fast races, but I just don't trust him. And Rated by Merit's kind of interesting. He's always showed potential, but just seems like they're all going to be, in the same spot, trying to get, for the lead. And it's going to be a fairly quick pace. And then they're going to have, Nisos, Journalism, and Antiquarian come running late. I don't know if they're going to be any of those horses could hold off all three of those. So I kind of just see this. To me, it's a 2-horse race. Unless something weird happens, I think it's going to be Journalism and Antiquarian. I'm going to fade Nisos. Yeah, he could win, and I bet against him before and lost. So yeah. So I mean, that like the Citizen Bull race. God, I thought Citizen Bull was going to win that race, but somehow Nisos got it done. All right, so now we move on to a completely different race. This is a weird distance. I think it's because of the way the turf course is set up at Saratoga. It's 9.5 furlongs. The Manhatten for older horses. Grade 1. Rhetorical off his big win on Derby Day. We'll try to do the same again in here. He's the favorite. You got a sharp Euro shipper Bright Picture. Will be the one maybe to vie for favoritism, maybe Deterministic, who's become really good since he's been moving to the turf. What do you think of those? Either one you like better than the others, or anybody else you like in here?
Nothing super exciting for me in this race. The 3 favorites, I think, are probably about 95% to win this race. I went through all of them trying to make a case for some others, but I just started with the morning line favorite, Rhetorical. And I mean, he just destroyed those horses. When you win a race by 3 1/4 lengths on the turf, I mean, that's like winning by 6 or 7 on the dirt. You just don't see it all that often. He was the favorite. Obviously, it didn't have a ton of depth in there, but some of the horses run back. Like I wanted to make a case for Make Me King, the 3-horse coming back in here. And, I just couldn't get there when I watched the race. I didn't see any way he was overcoming those 3 1/4 lengths. But that doesn't mean he can beat the other two favorites. I think it's a pretty close call. Deterministic, he's done very little wrong on the turf in his career, and he's going to be up front, and he's going to be very tough to run down, as he always is. He has good speed figures. The thing I think is Rhetorical is going to be right on his hip. So for me, it's kind of a toss up which of those two could really win. I'd probably give a slight edge to Rhetorical, but Deterministic's going to be a bigger price. So I value those two basically the same. The real question mark in here is Bright Picture, coming over from France for top trainer in the game that everybody's familiar with, Andre Fabre, and gets the top jockey, and Flavien Prat, or, one of the top jockeys. He's a horse that he's taken his time with him. He's not rushed him at any point. He's kind of went through his conditions, moved up the class ladder. Last time he finally moved him up into a Group 1, and he ran just fine. His time form ratings keep getting better. Now, he did lose by 3.5 lengths, but if you know who the horse who beat him is, that's the ARC winner from last year, who just came back in top form again. Dari's really top class horse. Normally, I'd be a little worried about a Grade 1 that early in the year in France. Doesn't usually draw the top fields, but that obviously wasn't the case in this one. And I think he ran really well, and I'm not going to be surprised if he's just better than these horses, because we see it a lot of times when horses from overseas ship over, they're just better than our horses. So if I had to make a top pick, it would probably be the 6 Bright Picture. I don't see a lot of value from any of these. If I was playing pick 5s, I would probably use all 3 of them in pretty equal strength. And as much as I wanted to make a case for anybody else in this field, I just couldn't get there.
Yeah, in terms of Bright Picture, the Timeform U.S. ratings that they put for the European horses, they always seem, and when you compare them to the Timeform U.S. numbers, it seems like they're always too low. Do you make any kind of mental adjustment on those, or do you just ignore them, or do you use them? I'm just curious, because it seems like the good horses always come over like this one, 120 versus, Rhetorical's run a 130, and it's Rhetorical 10 points better than Bright Picture. I don't think so. Is there any kind of adjustment you make on that, and how do you use those numbers?
I do for younger horses, not so much for older. I think they usually fall more in line. I was a little bit surprised that this number was as low as it was. As we know, the figures, the time form ratings, which these are direct from time form, they are not time. They have a little bit of time weighed in, but they are not time based. They are based on other factors. We try to get our scales to line up, and for the most part, they do a good job. I think we could do a lot better with 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds. With older horses, I think they're pretty close. I'm going to have to look into this one. I'm curious myself why it was so low. I thought it would be higher with the ARC winner winning by 3 lengths. Maybe the rest of the field wasn't all that strong, but I'm really not sure, but I'm not going to knock this horse because he only got a 120 here. I think he's better than that.
Yeah, because if you use those numbers, it's the slowest horse in the field, right? In which, doesn't make any sense. So you kind of have to ignore those numbers if you're going to look at this race and where you place this horse. Because I agree with you. He could very well be the horse to beat. Might be better going a little longer, right? This might be a little sharp for this horse, but certainly seems to have a lot of talent. One thing I will say for Make Me King is he was parked wide. He drew the 9 hole and he was wide on both turns. So I don't think it would have meant that he could have beat Rhetorical, but he might have been a little closer at the end. And Rhetorical got a uncontested lead in there, which he's not going to get in here. So, I could sort of make a case for Make Me King at possibly being able to get it done in here if Deterministic and Rhetorical start getting into it a little bit early, and Bright Picture, doesn't fire on the ship or maybe needs to go a little longer. it seems like Make Me King. If you watch his races in, Dubai and Saudi or Qatar or wherever, he looked pretty good. The race where he lost it in Dubai, he had a tough trip. So he's in pretty good form. And so I could kind of make a case for him. And I think he might go off higher than 8-1. I think rhetorical, deterministic, and bright picture are going to get bet down, I think, quite a bit. So anyway, I could maybe make a case for Make Me King in here. That's what I'm trying to make. Might be a bit of a stretch, but he seemed like the one that might have a chance, at least to break up those three.
While you were talking, I was looking at the actual Timeform site. One thing we don't get across in the Timeform US is that 124 had a plus, which means they think the race could be faster or the horses had faster. And as I looked at the field and I want to mention too, DeRise has already come back to win again with a 130 plus Timeform rating in another grade 1 in France. But when I look at that field, the third, fourth, and fifth horses, it was only a 5-horse field. They weren't very strong, so it's not a surprise they didn't want to overrate that race. And it's one of the things when you're not dealing with speed, it kind of can distort things a little bit. And I think it's just a case they didn't want to make those horses look better than they really were. Thus the plus rating. I don't want to speak too much on it because I don't make those ratings and I really don't know. But that's how I would view it. I think it's clearly a much stronger race, especially when you see the winner already came back and won.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like they're like cutting every race loose, so you're just looking at it, what the horses have run that are in that race, and making a number based on that. It's almost like you're projecting just off of that race. That's how it's. I mean, I know they don't do it based on time, but it's like beaten links, and they have this horse rated a certain rating, and like you said, that the Stars, who's the ARC winner, right? Isn't that the horse that won?
Yeah, DeRise, yeah.
DeRise. In a turf race, when you win by 3 lengths, it could just be a bunch of suck up behind you, right? That's what they're trying to avoid, giving those horses too big of a rating.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, that horse came back and crushed the field again.
Yeah. And he sounds like it came back and ran big in its next out. All right,
Yeah.
so it sounds like your bright picture is the one you're going to go with in here. Would you bet it to win or just?
No, I probably wouldn't because I think they're all very similar to win and they're probably going to be all very similar prices. This is definitely a race I will just be watching as a fan. In full disclosure, it's not a race I'm excited to bet, but it is one, sometimes I love watching a race without action when you get top class horses like this. And I'll be making notes for how Bright Picture does against these horses because we know we're going to see lots of Euro shippers later in the year as the races get better.
Yeah, it's just interesting the trainer decided to bring this one over this time of the year. Not the MO for this trainer at all.
Maybe he's trying to avoid that horse because he's keep running into him over and over again. And at this point, he looks extremely tough to beat.
Yeah, and that 130 probably wouldn't have beat him there. So this might be a smart move. For me, the only way I probably play this will be in picks, and I'll probably be spread. This will be a leg where I'll spread because I'll be tight the other ones mostly. But I could maybe see myself playing Make My King if he goes into double-digit odds. I might play him to win, but then back him up. But I'd be using him as the one maybe can get into the number at a price, can break up those 3 favorites. But it's not a race. I'm like the last 3 races we talked about. I like all of them from a betting standpoint. This one I'm probably not excited to bet. But that leads us into the big race, the Belmont Stakes at Saratoga, going 1.25 miles. I really think the 1.25 miles distance makes this a better race. You get the good horses run in it, where at 1.5 miles, it might be a good betting race, but it's going to be a bunch of future turf horses or second-tier horses that just aren't fast enough to get, compete at middle distances. But, here we get the 1.25 miles, so you get most of the good Derby horses coming back. not just the New York-based ones. You got all the expected suspects in here that skipped the Preakness except Further Ado, who opted for the Matt win in Kentucky. But you got, Renegade and Golden Tempo, who hit the wire together. You got Chief Wallaby and Commandment, who took a lot, and an emerging market, who all had, supporters going into the Derby, all had trips in the Derby. So what are you thinking about this race? And you got some of the newcomers as well that could be interesting. So a nice little mix. What are you thinking here?
I think this is a very good race. I mean, it's 9 horses. We talked about the Preakness. There were 14 in there. But honestly, I think I only thought 4 actually had a chance to win. Whereas in this race, I would say it's probably 6 or 7. Personally, I think it's 6. I know some people like the 2-horse power shift. I don't see that one. But it's the contention runs deeper. So I think it's a tougher race betting. And I think you really got to hone in on the value here. We'll talk about the horses that ran in the Derby because there's 4 of them. And the one I like the most, I'll just get right to it, is Commandment. I really like how this horse ran in the Derby. He, I think, had a really bad ride last time from Luis Saez, which may be a factor of why he's not on this horse in here. The pace was really fast. He just moved too soon, and not just that he moved too soon, he did it wide, and that's always kind of a death sentence for any horse in a dirt race, and even turf. If you're going really wide during the fastest part of the race, you're usually just sapping anything the horse has. And that said, I really still liked how this horse was able to finish up. He made a move into contention at the top of the stretch, flattened out a little bit after that, but it was to be expected. He had some traffic trouble as well. I think that's a little bit overblown. I think he was probably mostly finished by then, but I liked how he ran on and was able to finish without dropping way off the leaders. I mean, the 2 horses who ran on to be 1 and 2, they didn't have the greatest trips in the world, especially Renegade. But by that time, they were just flying. They were doing the best running they could possibly be. And they didn't really pull away from him all that much. So I really like Commandment in here. I like the rider change. I think he's going to get a much better trip than he did that day. And I go back to the 2 races in Florida where he beat a horse fair and square, and you could argue with worse trips in Chief Wallaby that's going to be, according to the morning line, half the price. Now, this is a tough morning line to make. I'm not going to knock David Aragona if he's a little off on this one, but I think he got it pretty good. But I just don't know how the betting's really going to go. But I think Commandment really is the horse to beat. Since I talked about Chief Wallaby, I'll just go with him. He's a horse who I think he kind of got a suck up 4th. He's another one, had a little trouble in the stretch, but he saved a lot more ground. His rider was more patient. So the fact he was able to pass Commandment late doesn't really do a whole lot for me. I think he's going to get overbet. He always takes a lot of money. I mean, he was only 7-1 in the Derby. Even though he had been beaten by Commandment fair and square, he was right there in the betting with that one. He ran fine. I just think he's going to get a little bit overbet in here. The same goes for Renegade. I have absolutely no knock on him. I think he's going to run fine. But one thing I haven't really talked about, there's not a ton of pace in this race at all. Something you definitely can't say about the Derby, where all the fractions were in red. The early pace figure was above the 150 mark. So it really was a setup for Renegade. I'm fully aware he had trouble at the start, but that trouble may very well have helped him out a little bit because he was drawn on the rail and it just got him that where he had to drop back and run in the clear. After that, he really didn't have too much in his way. He was able to get through clear and just got outkicked very late by a horse who was even further back than him, Golden Tempo. So I'm always leery to take horses at short prices that I know are going to be at the back of the pack on dirt. And that's particularly true when there's not a lot of pace in here. And I really don't see that. So I expect Renegade to run fine. I won't be shocked if he gets up and wins the race because he's just a really good horse. But I don't think he offers any value at all, similar to Chief Wallaby. And then you have Golden Tempo, who won the Derby, obviously 9-2 on the morning line. If he wasn't the Derby winner, if that last race was just the some other Grade 1 stakes race, he'd probably be 8-1 or 10-1 in this field. It's just the Derby that's gonna to get him up there. He's going to drop way back again, and I just don't see how those tactics are going to work at Saratoga in June when you only have a 9-horse field with little speed. He's a good horse. I think he's probably still a little bit underrated. He's improved his time form US speed figure every time out. You can see the same thing in his buyer pattern. He just keeps getting better and better. But I just do wonder if his Achilles heel is going to be his total lack of early speed. It was a good thing in the Kentucky Derby, but it was not a good thing in the Louisiana Derby or the Risen Star Stakes, where he lost to horses who probably aren't as good as him. And I think that's why he just has that one fall where he's going to drop way back and he's going to be subject to the pace in front of him. And I don't see a whole bunch in here. I didn't talk about the pace a lot. I assume Power Shift is going to go to the lead, being a stablemate of Renegade. I don't know if he's fast enough to set a crazy pace. I don't think the other contenders are going to go up and engage him and get in a speed duel with him. I think they're just going to ignore him and assume that they're better than him and take over as they get to the far turn.
So, I'm going to guess that the 2 horses you thought didn't have, other 2 that you didn't have a chance with, the 1 Vitruvian Man and the 5 Otno.
Yes.
But what about the 6 Growth Equity? What do you think of him? He's one you haven't mentioned that I would say
I don't want to totally dismiss him. If he drifted up to 20-1 somehow in this field, I would have some dollars on him. He's another horse who's gotten better every single time out on speed figures. He's won his last 2 races very easily, which, sometimes that can mean he's got more in the tank. But he's going to have to improve another 3 or 4 lengths. If he's in the 10-1, 12-1 area, I probably wouldn't be interested. But if he drifts, I don't totally dismiss him as a contender. I think he does have some kind of chance in here, unlike the 1 and the 5 horses.
So the one I'm just looking at his numbers. Like, he ran a 1:14 on Time Form US, right? And that's the same number that basically Commandment, Chief Wallaby, all the other horses been running. So why do you think he needs to improve that much to win?
Well, for one, Renegade's run faster, so he's going to have to beat that. But
not excluding that Renegade, but it seems, it sounds like any of these horses are fast. Is kind of my point, right? None of them have run fast, right?
No, none of them are particularly fast. The one thing I would say is the Derby, the speed figure, I think, is held down a little bit because of the size of the field and the traffic that these horses face. Growth Equity's coming out of a 5-horse field in the Peter Pan where, he might have lost a little bit of ground, but that's about it. There was no traffic, no bumping, no fighting for position out of the gate. It was just a very easy race. And you could even say the same about his maiden win. There were only 4 horses in that race. So, you got to look at the context of the race itself and how was the figure earned. I think that was one of the things I learned in the buyer race. And the Derby is just a really hard race. We've seen big figures in the Kentucky Derby, and they almost always come when the pace is fast and the horses up front hang on because they're able to avoid the traffic. They're able to, on Time Form US, get a little bit of boost from the pace figures because we adjust for that. But when it's a deep closer, it's going to be a slow race, and the horses who come from off the pace are almost always going to be affected negatively.
Yeah, that was a good point. So it's not so much he has to run faster, but he has to do it in a completely different kind of race instead of a small field. without much traffic or much pace. Now he's going to be in a much bigger field against a lot tougher competition. Can he
Right.
reproduce that same form?
Right.
But
And
just on the numbers alone, he really does.
Yeah.
He fits, you know.
But I'm saying the horses from the Derby are probably faster than what the number shows.
Than what
like,
you gave him. But even if you
if
go
you
to the
adjust
numbers,
it for trouble and bumping, they'd all probably be 120 plus horses. But that was just a really roughly run race.
Yeah. But I mean, prior to that, they hadn't run anything close to 120 other than Renegade. So, you know, to me, my assessment is these horses aren't that good. They're not that fast. I think with one exception, I actually think Renegade is a notch or two better than the rest of this field. He's always got that question about, you know, being pace compromised. Although, you know, in his Arkansas Derby, I think this race is going to go tactically about like that race, probably about the same pace. And, you know, he kind of got shuffled back. He was sitting up closer and then he kind of got shuffled back and then he came on again. You know, I don't think he's going to be that far off it. And I just think he has the turn of foot none of these other horses have, right? He's got that acceleration that it puts him at a different level. And he's run faster than they have too. So to me, he's the one to beat clearly. But I don't, you know, the rest of them, to me, you can throw a blanket over them and there's not that much separating them. I think you're kind of saying that too. You know, like you're not saying Commandment's a lot better than Chief Wallaby. You're just saying if he's gonna be a better price, I'll take him over Chief Wallaby, right? That's
that's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I made the point. We did just a Belmont Stakes video for DRF last night with Renegade and Golden Tempo that kind of is exactly what you're saying, and that they are not the same horse just because they both were way back in the Derby. Renegade on the Timeform US Running Styles is listed as a closer. Golden Tempo is listed as a plotter. Now that might not seem like much, but when I run queries on my database just using running style alone, there is a huge difference between the expected ROI of a closer and a plotter, with the closer being much better because they get into the race early. And as you note with Renegade, even though he was at the back of the pack in both the Arkansas Derby and the Sam Davis at Tampa, those races didn't have a lot of pace. They were just kind of even all the way around. And he was still able to blow those fields away. I mean, he didn't just win. He won by a lot. So I don't disagree with you at all. I think he's the best horse. I just don't want 2-1 on a horse who's going to have to pass every horse but one in here. If I were playing pick fives, I would absolutely use them because I don't think 2-1 wouldn't be value, but it's probably about fair for him in a field like this. So you're not going to get 5 overlays if you're playing pick fives or pick fours or whatever. You got to accept a list, sometimes even an underlay or so, maybe 1 or 2, and maybe a horse who you think is just fair. If you try to hit 5 overlays in a pick 5, you may die never cashing that ticket. So I would definitely use a horse like Renegade if I was going that far, but just in the individual race, I just don't see any value. But I agree with you. The others are all close. I didn't even mention a emerging market. He's a horse of all the Derby horses. I probably like him the least. I don't think he really had much of an excuse in there. He was up closer than the others, but he also kind of had the cleanest trip. He spit the bit earlier than any of the others, didn't really have any run in the end. He's only run 3 times, but he's the one I didn't like him going into the Derby. So there's no way I can like him coming out of that race.
Yeah, you know, just going back to Renegade, you know, to me, you know, it's overrated, but he got banged around just like we thought he would. And that's why he was so far back. Where Golden Tempo, that's just the way he runs, you know. But Renegade has more ability to lay close, and he's got a much better kick, or you know, the quicker acceleration. So, you know, I'm with you on everything about Golden Tempo. Of course, I don't know how much the casual money will play into it, but I don't think most sharp handicappers are going to like Golden Tempo for all the reasons you said. So I don't know, if he's going to be that much of an underlay. We'll see. But at 9-2, he's an underlay. And if he gets, he goes off at 9-2 or less, he's going to take money that he probably shouldn't. But to me, just Renegade, he's clearly the one to beat in here, I think. Certainly the best of the ones coming out of the Derby. I think he's a notch above those, but I agree with you. He's not going to be a play at the win price. But, to me, all the other ones are about the same. And so I can't get excited about Chief Wallaby or Commandment. Of the ones coming out of the Derby, I kind of like Emerging Market as the best value. I thought, he just got an aggressive ride from Pratt that backfired. And he had like a no chance trip. He did kind of make a little bit of a move to get in position. Then he got tired, but that was only his third start. And I know that Chad Brown was really high on him, and he could be laying pretty close in here ahead of those other horses, and he might run a much better race because his other two races weren't bad. So I go back to that Tampa Bay maiden race when Power Shift and Emerging Market, ran really big. They looked like they were good horses, and to me, they're as talented as any of these others. None except for Renegade. And the other ones have really distinguished themselves, I don't think. And you kind of dismiss Power Shift, but he ran pretty well on debut. He kind of got off to a bad start in Tampa Bay and kind of ran a clunker, but he came back and looked good at Churchill. He's going to be on the lead. I agree with you. Probably nobody's going to want to engage him going 1.25 miles. They all think they have a chance to win. I think he could turn for home on the lead and be tough to catch if they let him go too slow. He's got a lot of upside. He's been training with Renegade, and you could say Renegade's a little better, but tactically, Power Shift's going to get a much better trip than Renegade in here, and Renegade's probably the best horse in the race. So the fact he gets a little bit outworked maybe by Renegade is not. And Renegade probably outwork any of these horses. So I kind of like Power Shift in here, and I kind of like Emerging Market, not because I think they're great horses, but because I think they're as good as anybody other than Renegade. And like you said, Renegade's always going to be a little dicey because of the fact that he's going to have to pass a lot of horses to win. So I think I see this race a little bit different. To me, it's wide open, except Renegade is, the most likely winner, kind of significantly more than the others, but not enough to bet him to win. But in the picks, he would be my lean. But in the bets, I'm likely to bet Power Shift in here. I think he has a chance to pull a shocker and steal it. I don't think he's that bad a horse. I mean, his debut was really good with Emerging Market. They banged around with each other. He just looked pretty good. So we'll see. My main opinion is that the rest of them just aren't that great. I think the best horses in the Derby, other than Renegade, aren't in here, and those are Denon Bourbon and Further Ado. But we'll see. I think the rest of these are just kind of average bunch. Nothing really special. They don't have any tactical edge. They don't have any speed edge. So I'm going to try to beat them.
Yeah, my only concern with Power Shift on Timeform US speed figures, he's just not near fast enough. And the other concern I have with him is his Tampa Derby is the one time he raced without Lasix, which he has to do again. And that was the one stinker. But speed on the, lone speed is always dangerous. He's not for me, but I can certainly see your side of it. And then it's kind of good. We can't agree on every race.
Right. Yeah. On the Triple Crown, we've been in too much of an agreement. Of course, we haven't been wrong necessarily either. So, but yeah, the Lasix thing is, that Tampa Bay Derby is the question mark with that horse. What happened there? And if it's excusable, this horse looks pretty good to me because he's going to be loose early. And, especially if the track's favoring speed at all. Or if it starts raining and it comes up sloppy, right? he could be really tough. And there is some rain in the forecast. And they have such a long card. This race isn't until like 7 o'clock, right? So who knows what the track will be like. So yeah, I guess I agree. He's got to improve to win, and it's time for him. U.S. numbers are slow. They are a little bit slower than the some of the other numbers. But being loose on the lead, especially if they don't respect you, is always pretty dangerous. Now, if he doesn't deserve the respect, it really won't matter. We'll find that out. But I'm always, kind of interested when I think the other horses are all overrated. I could be seeing myself bet to win on Power Shift. And to me, how's Renegade get beat in here? Well, one of the ways to get beat is if his stablemate who's setting the pace doesn't stop, right? And he's not just a rabbit. I mean, he's in there because he's a complementary running style. But I think they're in it to win it, and they're not going to just send him out at some crazy pace to set it up for Renegade. They're just going to want to put him on the lead and make sure nobody else gets an easy lead. But if he gets the easy lead, they'll be happy to gallop along in front, I think. And so I think that's the one way maybe Renegade gets beat. That or just some really bad trip. The other thing about Commandment I got to mention this. Have you ever seen a horse that's this good that can't keep a rider from one race to the next?
Yeah, I don't put a whole lot of stock into that. I mean, I kind of get it. Pratt, who took off of him, he rides for Chad, and Saez did not give a good ride last time, so he came off. We know why Irads took off for Renegade, so I don't put a whole lot of stock into that, but it is kind of odd to see something like that. You don't see it very often.
Yeah, because he's a good horse and he's consistent. And they win with him in a graded stakes. Like they win a grade 1 stakes and they come off. They win a grade 1-2 stakes, they come off. Just kind of weird. He's a good horse, and I won't be surprised at all if he wins, or if Chief Wallaby wins, or if any of them win, except for a couple of the outliers. But to me, they're just not that good. The only really good horse in here, I think, is Renegade. We'll find out. They could all improve. Chief Wallaby, I was much higher on him early, but he just has become the horse who just doesn't want to give a full effort at the end. I don't know if it's because he can't get the distance, which I don't think is the case, or he just hasn't, put the effort out. But he always seems like he's traveling well. He looms up like he's going to finish off the race, and he just doesn't. And he just doesn't finish. And it's not like he's tired at the end, I don't think. I think it's a mental thing, and I just don't trust a horse like that. But I think the talent's there, and maybe all of a sudden, like they say, the light bulb will go off with him. But he always looks like a horse that isn't quite giving you his best in all his races.
Yeah, he's one that added blinkers, and I'm not really sure they changed anything for him in the Derby. It's hard when you watch that Florida Derby. Fountain of Youth, you could give him a little excuse because he was wide all the way around. But in the Florida Derby, it looked if you could bet at the top of the stretch, I think 90% of the people would have bet him to beat Commandment. Not only did he not beat him, he didn't even beat the Puma. He just seemed like he was reluctant to give it his all. So he won't shock me if he wins, but I just think he offers way less value. If I had to bet Renegade or him at the price, I would take Renegade 100 times out of 100.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I just don't. I was a little surprised. Commandment 6-1 in the morning line. I don't see how he goes off the same price as Emerging Market. I think Emerging Market's going to be a higher price. I
talked about that with him. He said he was very close to making Commandment 5-1 and Emerging Market 8-1, and he maybe regrets that one a little bit. But these races are so tough, especially when you're trying to consider the more casual money on a day like this.
Well, and he had to do like morning lines for all 3 Saratoga days, like in 24 hours or something. He was on a tough schedule. But yeah,
Yeah,
I
for
would.
sure.
I think that second is his alternative line probably is more in line with what it'll be. I think emerging market will be significantly higher than those other three from the Derby. But I do
Yeah.
think he has it right in order: Renegade, Chief Wallaby, Commandment, and then emerging market. That's probably how they'll get bet. I'm just not exactly sure, what the final price will be, but that in that order makes sense. And everybody else is going to be a price. Oh, and we forgot Golden Tempo. I'm not sure where Golden Tempo is going to land in that group. Probably he
No,
has that right too, but I don't know anybody. I don't know how anybody could handicap not want to fade that horse in this race, right? Based off of dynamics.
we talked about that last night. I mean, I know you're like David and me, and even Gino, who was on the show with us. We talked to a lot of horse players, right? None of the three of us have talked to a single horse player who likes Golden Tempo. I don't know if you're in a different boat from that, if you know anyone that likes them, but I don't think it's anybody trying to be clever. It's just
No.
common sense if you follow this game that horses like that they just don't come back and win. I mean, we've seen it with Derby winners before that ran with similar. They're good horses. It doesn't mean they're not any good, but they're just very, very unlikely to ever see those circumstances again.
Yeah, I agree. And it's just weird. The 3-year-old races just haven't had any speed in any of them except for the Derby, and the Wood. But like this is another one where you've got this grade 1 3-year-old race without anybody who wants to lead. Power Shift will likes to be forward, but he's never been on the lead. But he will be on the lead tomorrow, unless something weird happens at the start. And they're not going to be going that fast. So it's just another race, which should make this race, the race shape be the exact opposite of what we saw in the Derby.
Yeah, I
So
also wonder if with three Chad Brown horses in here, I mean, Chad Brown's a trainer who does like to give trainer instructions. I wonder if one of those horses is going to be sent. It's something that's hard to tell looking at the PPs which one it might be if that happens. But I mean, emerging market, he broke really well in the Derby and it probably got him in trouble. But it wouldn't surprise me if he broke well again and he's right there with Power Shift. Growth Equity has shown some speed in the past, so I'd be very surprised if maybe one of the Chads isn't sent to go up with Power Shift.
yeah, I mean, if you watch Emerging Market and when they ran against Power Shift, he doesn't have nearly the speed that Power Shift has. So I don't think he could go with them if they tried. Growth Equity, I don't see them sending him. Maybe, Otno, maybe that's the reason he's in the race, but he doesn't have a lot of speed. He did once make the lead in a maiden race at 1 1/8, which is not saying a whole lot, so I don't know.
It's hard to say. I wouldn't want to predict which one. The least likely to me would be Emerging Market because I think he probably thinks he's his main contender.
Yeah, yeah. So maybe
it won't surprise me if one of them goes for sure, because we've seen it before in turf races many, many times, and this is probably bigger than some of those turf races. So I wouldn't be surprised if one of those horses is, I won't say sacrificed, because being up close is never really a bad thing for me. But we'll see. It's just something to keep an eye on. If you're just solely, I know you're not, but if you're solely betting Power Shift on the thought that he's going to be all alone, like you said, he's never led before. So if somebody really wants to go, I don't know that he's that fast that he can just hold everybody off.
Well, if they get a dead send, then they'll want him on the lead, so that will really compromise his chances. Usually Chad is not that subtle about it. He just put a sprinter in here if he wanted a rabbit, though. But Otno could just be the sacrificial lamb. I don't know. He's been pointing this horse to this race for, he was talking about putting him in the Preakness, and he didn't. Now he's, I don't know. And so maybe that's why he's in here. But he's certainly not the kind of horse you'd think of as being one that they would send, because, they started him going 1 1/8 in his second start, and he hasn't gone any shorter than that since then. And he hasn't been anywhere near the lead in his last two. So it would have to be a trainer instruction to get him on the lead here. But maybe they'll do it, and that would change the race shape for sure. No doubt. And I just think if that happens, then Renegade just seems really tough to beat in here to me. I think he's clearly the best. If it's not just something, a trip kind of thing is the only thing I see that getting him beat. Because, in the smaller field, if he's probably not going to get banged around and, drop way back like he did last time. And, with the way he can accelerate, when they turn for home, he's going to be moving. He's going to be hard to hold off, I think, if there's an honest pace. If they slow it down to a crawl, then anything could happen. So we'll see.
Yep.
All right. Anything else on that? I did have some questions from listeners. So of the card, the 5 race we talked about, what's the bet you're most eager to make in this sequence?
Let's see. I definitely do like the Jaipur. I'm looking forward to betting that one. That and the Met Mile. Those are the two. I think I have them narrowed down to 2 horses I really like. I'm mainly exactas are my favorite bet. So yeah, it would be the Met Mile and the Jaipur.
Yeah, and I'm with you. We both like John the Beer Man and the Jaipur. We both think antiquarian and journalism are the 2 in the Met. And I really like obliteration in between. So I'll be playing that sequence a lot of different ways. And I probably won't just go cold with the horse I like. I'll use journalism as a backup with antiquarian and probably crude velocity with obliteration, and maybe a couple in the Jaipur. But if one of those wins, I'll have probably a decent day. If 2 of them wins, be a good day. If all 3 win, I'll probably be really doing well tomorrow. All right. So anything else on this before I get to the questions? Did get some questions. I want to go through them real quick.
Fire.
All right. Ken Badaway had I'm a question. He's playing the 2-day wagers. Do either of us have any bets for the Friday races? Have you looked at those at all?
I assume the Phipps is maybe involved in those. I'm against Nitrogen. I know she's going to be the heavy favorite, but I really don't like horses who lose at short prices often, which she does. So I'm going to take a chance against her. Bless the Broken is a horse I think is very interesting. She hasn't had any pace to run into this year. She's run pretty well, and I just think she's sitting on a top effort. She's going to be 5 times the price Nitrogen is. So I will definitely be playing her.
Yeah, and I like the 2 Regaled in that race. She needs some pace to run into, but in the small field, if they set a decent pace, I think she's the best closer. So I kind of like that one. Run some good races before. I agree with you. Try to beat Nitrogen in there. All right, a couple other questions from David M. I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name. As a speed figure guy, I was wondering if you look at all at class when evaluating a race. This is for you, Craig, the figure guy.
Yeah, when I'm making figures, I don't look at class at all. But when I'm handicapping, I definitely do. If a horse runs a giant figure in a much weaker class, then it's just going to come down to odds. But I will definitely view that figure as not as reliable as if they did it against better horses. It kind of depends if you're talking about lightly raced horses, 2 and early season 3-year-olds that do it. I'm more likely to accept it at face value, but occasionally I'll make figures and you get some claiming horse that wins by 15 and runs a 110 speed figure. I'm not suddenly going to bet him if he shows up in a stakes race with the best figure because I know something was probably fishy there. There could be a lot of reasons for it, which we don't really need to get into. But yeah, there's definitely times with that. And there's horses in here, like we didn't really get into it today. Saudi Crown in the Met Mile is a horse whose figures stack right up with everybody else. But when you look at the races where he does his best running, they're always like listed stakes or allowances. And when he steps up into graded company. This is after his 3-year-old season. He just not only does he not run well, he just tanks. So you kind of got to avoid horses like that, that they're kind of bullies when they're in against horses that they're just better than. They can run big numbers, but when they step into tougher company, they don't have that same kind of run.
Yeah, class is kind of a nebulous term, but I mean, if you define it as, the ability to run the race against, a certain quality of horse, depending on what, then that sort of makes sense. It is a little bit derivative from other things, though. Like for me, class comes into a lot more like in sprints. It's a lot of times it's just pace, right? Horses that, they get into a race with a hotter pace than they're used to and they crumble. But it's really the pace. It's not a magical class thing. It's just they can't handle the pace. But, at the higher levels, you tend to have faster paces. So that's what I mean by being kind of driven. It's kind of the opposite in turf racing. A lot of times it's just the ability to finish, right? And they get in these races where the horses can come home in 21 and change, and they just can't keep up, right? It's not because, again, a magical class thing. It's just they aren't as good a finisher. So a lot of times I think it's derivative, especially when the horse hasn't been at that level before. Looking back, it's easy to say, well, yeah, they were able to do it. But, a lot of times it's a derivative of other things like speed and pace. It's not some magical thing like they hit grade 1 and they can't win. Well, there's a reason why they don't win in grade 1. It may be that they're a speed horse that, the pace tends to be hotter and they crumble, or they're, on the turf and they just can't finish with those top horses. So that's where I just a little careful.
Yeah, the other thing I'd say is a lot of times when horses run big figures in lower class races, it's because they're all by themselves. They're not racing in traffic. They don't lose any ground. Taj Mahal was a good example why I didn't like him in the Preakness at all. He had won by 8 lengths, but he only ran a 110 Timeform US speed figure, which was still below some of the other horses in the race. And it's very hard to imagine a horse like that is going to improve his speed figure when he steps into better competition. It's almost always the other way around. Now, as it turned out with him, he just turned around and ran the same exact figure in the Preakness, despite being beat 13 lengths. And that's generally what happens. If a horse is moving way up in class, I want to see a figure that's better than the horses he's facing before I'm going to consider him.
Yeah, and if he's like a front runner, I want to see him having run the races at a pace he's likely to encounter in that race, right?
Yep.
You don't want to see him, getting away with soft fractions or, breathers in the middle of the race, and now he's going to go step up in class. And you want to see a horse that's done it, kind of faced similar paces. So anyway, that the class is always a tricky thing to talk about. It's not easy. It's not simple. It's not as easy to find as like speed and pace and those kind of things. All right, another one. This is quick. How's the Hong Kong stuff going? Are you still working on Hong Kong stuff?
For my actual job, we've kind of taken a hiatus on that. I'm still tinkering with it personally.
All right. So still a work in progress, it sounds like.
Yes.
All right. And the last one, you kind of responded to this, but I think the question, it was from Len Dodson. He said, Timeform US pars are typically around 17, 19 points higher than DRF. I think he said pars, but I think typically, your scale is about 20 points different from the Beyer scale, I think is what he was saying. But he said sometimes they differ by more than that or less. What could cause that? And so I think maybe that's a good way. You kind of explain how your pace adjustment can impact the figure and how it could be, even though you and Beyer have the same variant on a race, you could have a different number, adjusted figure than the Beyer. Maybe that'd be worth explaining.
Yeah, I don't want to go into too much on this because honestly, I didn't even know that there were pars for Timeform US. He's kind of directed me to where they were, so I told him I'd get back to him, but I really don't know. But yeah, if you look at the final time figures for Buyer and myself, they're almost always not. The average is going to be about 20 points. But we factor in, our overall figure is not the final time figure. It includes pace, and that can be deductions for slow pace on dirt or increases for fast pace on dirt or slow pace on turf. So the final time figures may line up more than the overall numbers. That would probably be why the difference is there. I'm going to look up and see what these pars actually are because it's not something I've ever used. I don't use them to make speed figures. We've never really used pars at all. It's all projection, so it will be interesting to see. But as I told him on X, I really can't give a detailed answer because I'm not familiar with them.
Yeah, and I just to plug my book, Betting on Horses. I have some going to how the different numbers are different, how Timeform US is different than DRF, and how the sheets are different than both of those, and how some players do their own numbers and how they're different. So if you want to know more about how figures are made and why some may be different and which figures you might want to use based on the methodology, my book, Betting on Horses, go to Bet with the Best Media. betwiththebestmedia.com. You can find out more about the book. Got to take every advantage I can. And hey, Father's Day is coming up. That'd be a great Father's Day present if you've got a father or someone that's a father and they're a horse player. Betting on Horses book might be the perfect gift for Father's Day. All right, anything else, Craig, before we wrap it up?
Oh, just one quick thing as I look. I think he may be talking about the race rating, which is not really a par. It's more of the horses in this field, what kind of figure we expect the race to be running.
Okay.
Got
it.
But I'm still not positive. Maybe there's something I'm missing, but I think that might be what he's talking about.
But that race rating is a good kind of thing to see if you're talking about class. That race rating is kind of defining, here's the ability level on kind of how we'd rate this race based on the ability, the proven ability of the horses in the race. And you can see what were the ratings of the horse has been running, the prior races, and see, is this really a jump up or down in terms of the level of quality of this field versus what they've been running. And it's a nice little way to get a quick comparison to kind of assess that.
A good example, since I have Taj Mahal's PPs up, we have a 119 for the Preakness. The Woody Stevens we're projecting as a 120, so it might even be a little bit better race than the Preakness. That surely has to do with crude velocity and Englishman in here, but one thing to keep in mind is that race rating, we do it before the race as a guess, but after the race, it will change by how the horses actually run, and that will be what's in the charts.
Yeah, and so that's a good way to kind of just, kind of get an overall, this is how tough this race was.
Yeah, and to your point about the Belmont Stakes, we only have that as projected a 115, which is not very good for a Triple Crown race. So it
not a grade one kind of level, and that just goes to what I was saying, that the horses aren't, at least, I mean, they could be good, and they may down the line prove to be really good. I mean, Gunrunner was a below 115 horse at this point in his career, and he turned out to be a great horse. Unfortunately, we don't usually get to see those horses develop. But to this point, and given, I think this bunch is somewhat overrated, especially the Florida horses. They really haven't run fast. And they didn't run fast in the Derby. Now, that could be suppressed because of all the things you said. But so far, none of them have shown to be really good. The only horse to me that's shown like kind of exceptional talent is Renegade. And the rest of them, just a mediocre bunch to me. And that's why I'm not afraid to take a flyer on a horse like Power Shift, maybe, just because of that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's good discussion. I'll wrap it up, I think. Thanks, Craig, for joining us and making the quick turnaround for the entire Triple Crown. What a rarity. You made it for all three, Well, I appreciate that. So do the listeners. And we appreciate the listeners. And that'll conclude show number 364 of the Sport of Kings podcast. Good luck this weekend, and please enjoy the Brooklyn Boogaloo Blowout. Cheers. All right, that's a wrap.
Great. Sounds good.